Okay, so some of the questions that just have come up help me to see that I want to clarify a few things. One thing that Siddhi said was, I thought there is, she asked in the sense of like in Tantra, for instance, in Buddhist Tantra, you find the explanation of everything being a projection of the mind. That is not just according to Buddhist Tantra. Tantra is actually just a technique, it's a meditational technique. It's not a philosophy as such. Now, actually, this is also true when you study the non-tantric system, that nothing exists objectively. That's just another way of saying everything is subjectively, and therefore it's a projection of the mind. Okay? And then I talk like, well, the sense consciousness perceives the object as it is. I hear myself saying it and I'm thinking, whoa, how else would I say it? I mean, it's of course not saying that there is this external world and we perceive what is just there. That's not what I'm trying to suggest. But just to understand the difference between conceptual mind, that where you have that self-created image that is created by yourself, by way of which you perceive an object, versus not having that image, and just the object nakedly appearing. But when I say it appears nakedly, I'm not suggesting that actually there's something out there and I just perceive it the way it is. That's not what I meant. Can you get what I'm saying? It is still like the movie that's like the movie, the projector is still a picture kind of like appearing, the projector, the film itself appearing directly, versus you need something else by way of which that film can appear. So directly and indirectly. But in both cases, we're not suggesting that there is an objective reality, right? So to always think it's just a projection of the mind, if you just take colors, for instance, I mean, honestly, that I perceive color as blue, for instance, is because of the eyes I have. It's because of the brain I have. It's because of all these factors. So if there were objective blue, and it was not dependent on those, we would all perceive it in the same way. Right? Everything is objective. I mean, it's funny, like, for instance, when I come to this room, yesterday evening, I put on my winter dress. This is my summer dress. I was so hot last night, and people keep closing the window. So it's a very different perception of this room. So for this, now, this is total summer dress. Because this is what I wear in Dharamsala when it's 30 degrees. So obviously you don't feel the same way as I do. Okay, so in the same room, I feel warm, you feel cold. I love the food in Yechiam. I love the food. Oh, Yechiam food. But I know you don't love it. So if there were an objective reality, I would have the same perception of you of the food. For me, this is amazing food. You spend a day in the nunnery I live in, then you know what is. Anyway, never mind. But this is for me absolutely a highlight. Our food here. In fact, Tuvala was too much. Tuvala was too much for me. I mean, that was too much. It was too overwhelming. Like all this great. I like it that way. I really like it. So it shows you things are subjective, right? Food and temperature, those two basic things, and I have a very different perception of them. So it's very subjective, and individually for you, of course, different too. So that shows it. So now when I say the food in Yechiam, I seem to be suggesting there's this objective food, because you call it the food in Yechiam, and I call it the Yechiam food, but the one you eat and the one I eat is very different. The temperature in this room, my perception of it, and your perception, very different. Maybe for her similar, she just took off her sweater. So, yeah, similar perception. No, but you see what I'm trying to say? So, therefore, that's just a matter of talking. But in actuality, there's nothing subjective. But there's more of an input from the mind in the case of a conceptual mind, of like everything we associate with that, it keeps mixed, like past experience come mixed into it. Whereas with a direct perception, there's less of that. Okay, great. That was one thing I wanted to say. Another thing, someone came and asked about prostrations. That's very good. I'm glad this question about, because this is very disturbing for a lot of people, especially when you're new to this. So I'm saying this to those who are not familiar with that. On one hand, you hear Buddhism is a religion. No, you hear Buddhism is a way of life. It's not a religion. And then there's all this stuff around that we associate with religion. Okay, so therefore I'm asked that again and again, is Buddhism a religion or not? Well, it depends on, yeah, that's a prostration. Someone just did the movement, that's exactly it, yeah. So this kind of, what is this? Like, come on, it's all about philosophy and a way of life, and then you have all this stuff. I mean, come on, the way I look is weird enough, right? I mean, it's a lot of maroon there. And so there's all this package Buddhism comes in. And this needs to be explained in the sense that there's always a reason for doing it. It's all psychology. It's all psychology. Everything that you do it can be beneficial to the individual, right? And so actually what's important is the message behind it. And a lot of the stuff you see are just techniques to keep mindful. That's it, right? If you look down on myself, oh, party, no party, I'm a nun. Right? It's just, for me it's good. Look down on myself, because my habits, my old mind, and I'm thinking, and it just, I look down on myself, and there it is. You look at me, and you relate to me differently. So in that sense, it's a protection. It protects my mind, and it protects me from people's misperception. In India, obviously, I'm not interested, I mean, I don't know whether in other countries, but if you live in India, in Asia, this means off limit. Right? No, I mean, nowadays I'm old, so now it doesn't matter, but when I was young, right, I'm no longer 20. But when I was 20 and guys looked at me, right? The moment I shaved my head, gone. That's it. Right? It was one haircut and my life changed. So it was a kind of protection. No guys looked at me, no guys on a motorbike would go, right? As I see people do with like girls in India, for instance. No, it doesn't happen. So totally, it's a kind of protection. So it's just psychological. It's not about the clothes. It's not about the hair. It's about what it represents. Okay? And then the prostration thing. I want to mention it because I know in Israel, it is so not part of the Jewish culture. I'm not saying you're religious, but it's also become part of the Jewish culture not to bow down. Although I think Jewish people bow down. Right? You don't...
We do.
That's what they do. They don't go like this. You can do this too. But no one does that. So it's a kind of bowing, right? So there is that in a way. But of course it's bowing towards God, and that's okay, right? Okay, no, I get that. You see, you have a similar thing. I mean, the Tibetans also do that, actually, when they memorize or something. And I think also in the Quran schools, they also, when they memorize, they do that, right? Not really this, but this I've seen. So, but it all has an effect on the mind. So there's certain movements, there's certain actions that have a profound effect on the mind, and that's why you do them. Okay? Now my interpretation, and I may be wrong about it, but about prostration, like bowing down, doing this whole thing, and you don't have it, in some cultures you just go like that. Okay? It's actually seen as a sign of respect. Seen as a sign of respect. So in Japan, it's really extreme, right? But even in India, like just saying hello, for instance, or in the West, when you shake someone's hand, you kind of bow a little bit, right? Boys are supposed to bow. Girls do this funny thing, right? With the queen, do this kind of funny thing. So you go down a little bit, or you bow your head, right? And when you agree with someone, you go, oh, right? So it's kind of our culture. When you're arrogant, you go, right? Arrogance is expressed by kind of looking up, yeah, right? King Kong, kind of, right? So it's because of gravity. It's because of gravity. It's to do with gravity. It's how the world works. So in terms of humility, means you're open to something else. You pour something into something else. If you want to pour liquid into a vessel, the vessel in which you want to pour something needs to be lower, right? So because of that, this has been like that for us for many lifetimes, basically. Let's assume we lived, or it's in our genes, if you like. So that, therefore, lowering yourself allows you to put something in there. So that's that mechanism. If I'm humble, then I'm open to new ideas. Whereas if I'm proud, no, I don't want to hear anything. I know better. Okay? So I think it's all expressed, our gestures, our result, our, acting like that, has all to do with pouring something into something, opening yourself or not. All right? So I see that connection here. And I think if gravity were the other way around, humility would be this, and pride would be this. Right? I mean, it's hard to imagine, but anyway, that's just my theory on why gravity and so forth plays a part in it. But it's really just an expression of you mentally opening up, kind of reminding yourself, okay, there's more I can learn. So you prostrate with this in mind. This is like really, prostration is actually mental. If you don't think I'm opening myself up, then what you do is exercise. It's not a bowing, it's physical exercise. So it's better than not getting any exercise, so I guess. But the Dalai Lama, he jokingly says that when you do this, it's actually the mental process, okay? So for me, for instance, what I'm required to think is when I do these prostrations, I'm going to sit on a seat that is higher than you, right? So there's danger that I think, whoa, I'm sitting here and you're down there. So to also remind myself, I'm only sitting here because I have something to share that doesn't come from me, that I've just learned about it, and not to think like I've got something special to say here. I'm representing what someone else has said. So I am reminding myself, wow, someone else, like the Buddha, this is just a representation of these great beings like the Dalai Lama. So just to remind myself, great, thank you for this gratitude. Thank you, and I hope I'll be able to represent you well, right? And then in your case, listening to teachings, and again, it has nothing to do with me. You're actually opening yourself up to a new idea. That's all it is. And the reason you do prostration, you do it 3 times, because it's hard enough to be focused. So 3 times, at least once you get it right. And when you do that, it's easier to keep the mind focused. Because there's a mental... It's like when you recite mantras, right? You kind of go like this. Because when you count them in that way, you're doing something physically that allows your mind to keep focused. So you for instance, you recite Om Mani Padme Hum, which means compassion. It refers to compassion. So this is the mantra of compassion. You're less likely to plan a murder of your neighbor while saying Om Mani Padme Hum, because it's associated with compassion. So it's a mantra, which is another word for saying mind protection. A mantra means literally that which protects your mind. So you recite a mantra verbally or even mentally, and you move your hands to keep focused. Okay? Because if I just do something else, I may just be distracted, no longer recite the mantra, and the protection is gone. So everything in Buddhism is about the mind, but saying certain things and acting in a certain way can assist the mind in keeping mindful. That's it. So it's not about bowing down, because it's better you stand still and mentally kind of go, I'm ready, I'm opening myself. That's a real prostration. If then you don't prostrate, doesn't matter. If that is missing and you prostrate, it's just exercise. It's physical exercise, right? Okay. So I think that's important to understand. And so when you learn about Buddhism, everything, even these tankas, they're called tankas, as in like a religious picture, each color has a certain effect on the mind. The shapes have an effect on the mind. So the reason they look like that is because meditators in the past, the Buddha himself, but also meditators in the past, have found certain colors and certain shapes to have a positive effect on the mind. So it's not important that you have a picture there. It's only to be inspired. So when you go into a temple, it's all psychology. When you go into a temple, right? For some people, when you see all these images, they represent something for you and it inspires you. And then you burn incense. So that reminds you of the Dharma, certain smells. So that's why you have the incense burning. When you do your practice, you burn the incense because your mind automatically, like it's what is it called? The Pavlovian dog?
Yeah.
Right? It's that. If you burn incense, let's take the example. You burn incense and you beat up the dog. Every time you put on a incense stick and you beat up the dog, you don't need to beat up the dog for the dog to get scared just when you put on the incense, right? That's a negative aspect of that. But if every time when you meditate, you put on some incense, then you associate that smell with the sitting down and becoming calm. So first you put on the incense, you start making your mind calmer, and then it grows calmer. And so later, after, you do this often enough, and then all you need to do is burn the incense and your mind goes, So it's easier. That's it. It's just psychology. And if incense doesn't do it, well, then you just leave it aside. It's not the incense itself. It's just how our mind works, that external factors can affect us in a certain way. Associations, very good. Associations that we have. So if you understand, Buddhism is really just that. And in some cultures, having an empty room was more inspiring than having a full room, like the Tibetans. I mean, it's full. It's seriously full. But then the country is pretty plain, right? In the summer, yeah, you have a lot of flowers, but in the winter, however beautiful it gets in the summer, in the winter, there's just dust. You have desert-like areas, right? Tibet is not a colorful country as such. Yeah, not like India, not like Japan, which can be beautiful with the cherry blossoms, etc. So it also accounts for where it comes from. So if it's in the plain mountain areas where there are no trees growing, well, you put some color in there because it's just not there. You see, it all has to do with psychology. So therefore, if it becomes just an external, and I think you have that in Judaism too. You have that in Judaism too. Why do you put these little things at the door? I don't know what they're called. These little, right? It's a mindfulness. You remind yourself, right? And I've also been told when you put these, right, in the little boxes, it's like, sorry, I don't know the right words for it, but to me they look like little boxes. And I think it's like heart, and bringing the heart and but it's beautiful. It's psychology, right? So I of course, it's also become part of the ritual, but I think someone who's really learned and studied well, they understand the meaning behind it and fully profit from the psychology. I think with eating kosher, it's just healthier. I mean, I've asked about this, like in terms of and it's become part of the religious aspect, but it's psychologically, there are reasons for that. And all religions are about the mind in the end. Of course, it can get lost. You also have lots of Buddhists who've lost that, who have no understanding of that. They go through the motions and think they're very religious, and they're not. But that's why you study Buddhism. You learn about it, and then you understand those are just techniques. And at some point, you can leave them away. Like Chaya and I had that talk yesterday. Basically, Chaya brought it up. She said, well, once Buddhism is established in the West, then things can be left away. And I agree with her. The bowing, I mean, well, unless you want to use it as exercise, you may not, may be expressed in a different way, right? And I remember it's almost like Kelsang Rinpoche. It's so funny. It's almost like Kelsang Rinpoche has such great understanding of the Dharma. And it's expressed by how he explains things. It's like the examples are different, everything is different. And at one point he said, like in Islam, they have the growing of the beard. So we need something external to remind us of the Dharma. Let's just wear all special socks. This is our idea. It's like wearing special socks. So every time you look at your feet, you're like, oh, I'm a Dharma practitioner. So in Islam, you may have the beard, or for women to put on the scarf. It may be just a reminder of something, right? And trust me, when I put on certain robes, like the external yellow one, I feel a little bit more religious. Because you do it when the Dalai Lama is present, for instance. So your mind is different. Okay? And that's all it is. In the end, that's the whole idea. And we have those little things in everyday life all the time. Little external factors that remind us of something. Right? I can't think of an example right now, but I'm sure you can. So I'm glad the question came up. Yes, please.
How does frustration work to clean our karma? If it's only a mental,
frustration's used as purifying karma. Actually, you can do anything. You can jump on one leg. And you see, you can go and work in a hospital. You see, actually, the way purification, it's sometimes misunderstood. There's this sense that if I do a certain action, then it will automatically purify karma. No way. No way. Most important is the 4 powers. 4 powers. So to wish to purify, to understand I've done negative things, so to generate regret. Generating regret. That's the most important. To generate regret and to generate at least the determination, I will try my best to not do this again. Okay, those are most important. So this one, and also to generate, to rely on something that is associated with something positive. So a Buddha, an awakened being who symbolizes positive actions, who stands for positive action, who stands for enlightened wisdom and compassion. And then you engage in an action of purification, which should be a little bit difficult. Right? It should be something that is not easy. Kind of, I don't think that's very purifying, just doing this. Though that can be hard, just, you know. But actually, it is said, whatever action you do, if you generate those 4 powers, those 4 attitudes, you purify negative karma. And I believe if you don't have to do prostrations. Prostrations are just difficult, they're hardship, and also they're associated with paying respect. So if you have that respectful mind doing it, the 4 powers and the hardship, it can purify karma. I personally believe it's better to work in a hospital. If you want to do a purification retreat, go to an old people's home and make sure, but it's just a little harder to keep focused on the purification if you're in an environment where it's stressful and you have to do certain things. So because when you do prostrations, you're doing the same over and over again and it's hardship, then you're more likely to keep focused with your regret, with the sense, what I've done was wrong. I mean, not guilt, that's an extreme, no. What I was wrong, what I did was wrong, and I will do my best to not repeat. End of story. And with this you do it, and it's said to be a countermeasure of this negative action. That's it. But you can do anything you do, washing dishes. If you remember, every time you brush your teeth, okay? Every time you brush your teeth, and you do that for 3-5 minutes, if you generate the 4 powers, brushing your teeth will be good for your teeth and good for your purification. So therefore, it's not about the action, it's about the other factors. Does that make sense? Yes. So prostrations in themselves is just traditionally how it's done. In Tibet we didn't have that many hospitals and stuff, so... Okay. But just being with other people, everything, if it's a positive action, right, and you've done the 4 powers, you purify. Yes.
If you harm someone,
yes,
you don't have to make some action to compensate me?
If you can, that'd be great.
Okay.
If you can. But, I mean, when you purify, you also try to consider all the actions that you don't even remember from a previous life, from months ago, years ago. So, if you can compensate, of course, wonderful. And sometimes we've harmed one person, and we may try, even if we can't help that person in that moment, we may keep that in mind and help another person. Yeah. So again, it's all psychology. So it's important to understand what's behind it. I know we're a little bit off topic. I know, but I think it's so important, because otherwise you have philosophy here and you have all this weird stuff there, and people are turned away by that. But it's not necessary. It's like just not understanding, and you don't need that stuff. You actually don't need it. Okay? If you just mentally open yourself, and as an antidote to arrogance, kind of like, I'm open to it, that is a prostration. That's much better than doing it without thinking anything. Right? Okay. All right. Now, what I'd like to continue with is the category of valid cognizers and non-valid cognizers. Okay. Again, not that hard to understand, but why do I mention it? The wrong consciousness, correct consciousness is helpful. Conceptual, non-conceptual is definitely also helpful. Valid cognizer and non-valid cognizer, in the way we've already described it, But this idea is seen as really, really important. This idea is seen as very, very important. In the sense that a valid cognizer means to know your object. A mind that knows its object. Okay? So it can be a sense consciousness, it can be a mental consciousness, but a valid cognizer is a mind that realizes, that knows its object. Now you may wonder, why is it important to know your object? Also, what we sometimes get wrong, a lot of the times we think we know something which we actually don't know. So many things we say we know, we don't know. Would you agree with me? Give me an example, if you agree. Yes.
World is round.
World is round. Ah, you heard me say that. Okay, maybe not me, but yeah, that's usually the example I use, saying the world is round, right? And then let's have other examples. So the earth is round. We say we know that. But the word to know, to realize, in Tibetan means something very specific. Usually the question that is often asked is like, ask you, what day were you born? What day were you born? What day of the month?
Me?
No, you.
17th
17th of August. 17th of August. She was born on 17th of August. You know that, right?
I was told.
You were told, right? Right? Actually, yeah, you're absolutely right. You know that. We think we know that, but actually we just assume it. Probably correctly. You correctly assume. So when we say, I know the world is round, or I know that aspirin makes my blood thinner, or whatever, we don't know that. We believe that's true. We've read the information, we know what it says, maybe online, in Wikipedia or some medical text, but we don't know. We don't incontrovertibly know. Why? Because if the next time someone comes along and tells us, well, aspirin actually doesn't thin the blood, we're ready to take it on as what we were ready to take it on when we were told it thins the blood, right? Or hummus is good for you, right? And then the next day we hear, no, actually it's not. Okay, so there's some, or coffee or whatever, right? So there's some reasoning that makes sense, and it's not just, well, it is because it's Friday, right? Hummus is good for you because it's Friday. I mean, that's not a correct reason, and we're not ready to accept it. But if we hear some reasoning that makes sense to us, we very readily accept it. So honestly, most of what we think we know, we don't know. We haven't really understood it incontrovertibly. Which means that once you know something, if someone else tells you the opposite, you're not swayed by it. Right? I know Leora is sitting there. Okay? And whatever you tell me, I know she's there. You tell me she was not there, but I know she was there. Okay. Now, of course, you could then say, well, maybe it's an hallucination. Okay, well, then I have to doubt everything I perceive. But it's just in terms of conventional, like everyday life. I know I didn't have breakfast this morning. I was not there. I know. Okay? Whether you were there or not, if someone tells me Leora was not there, I don't know, but I believe it. So I say, yeah, I know. So what I'm trying to say is that there's very little that we actually know. All right. And that is also true in terms of understanding of Buddhism. But knowledge is absolutely crucial. Certain things you need to know. Because if you don't know them, you can't remove the misperception, the misapprehension of reality. So there's a lot of emphasis on how I can gain knowledge. I don't need to know everything, but certain things I need to know. It's important. Okay? Which is why there's so much emphasis on knowledge. Now, one aspect I'd like to address here, because people believe, well, Buddhism, it's also about faith, right? Past and future life. You can't know that. So there it is again, these Buddhist systems, it's just like another religion where they require you to have faith. Well, honestly, we say we live in a century where we're enlightened, like where we have knowledge, we don't take on blind faith, etc. But we have blind faith as we used to have before. Now we have blind faith in science. Right? We have blind faith in science. We read it so and so, it's such and such. So in the past day it was because rabbi, give me a name of a rabbi.
Nachman.
Hmm?
Nachman.
Because Rabbi Mehmet